This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Three parts to the plasma energy cycle. There's a spin up to the plasma state. There's the plasma energy burst. And then there's the plasma energy collapse. And it all happens in that order. Now, that high pressure movement can be used to run an engine. Joe Papp discovered it, and Joe Papp used it to build a motor.
Okay, I've got a little control box here. What I will do is quickly charge the capacitors, then we will just fire a single pulse.
Now, did you see what happened there? All right, this thing pulsed. If this was a normal explosion, like if we had charged this up like in a regular engine, it would have blown the top off this thing. It would have hit very hard. So one of the things you got to notice here is this happens fast. We're getting the plasma energy pulse, which is causing the explosion, and then we're getting the collapse. And that's why it doesn't blow through the top of the cylinder. So he's going to do it a couple more times here. Now, Bob can do this hundreds and hundreds of times. It doesn't get hot. If you do it 500 times, there's a little bit of electricity, maybe 2 degrees in the cylinder is the most he's seeing. So there is no heat gain in this process. This is all an expansion and a collapse without any heat.
Yeah, my name's Jimmy Scoring, and I saw your videotape on how you move objects, and it was terrific, just amazing. The only problem with you, and the difference between you and me, you went and showed it to the government and they took it away, and I'm not showing mine to the government anymore. I showed it once, but they didn't believe me. So real quick, I want to show you my engine, and this is a 2-cylinder engine, 400 horsepower. And I move objects this way along on wheels, like a bus, a truck, a car, an airplane with, this is free energy, there's no input. And basically I work on a vacuum. Both of these cylinders are totally vacuum with inert gases, helium, and the other 5 gases, which are xenon, krypton, and neon. And what I do is I take energy from one cylinder, transfer from this one, and take energy from this one, transfer through all this maze of wires. I don't have any power at all whatsoever. The power must come from the empty cylinder to the firing cylinder, and then the firing cylinder switches it back to the empty cylinder and fires the empty cylinder, and back and forth and so on. I use a coil just like a regular car, and I use 24 volts, so that's the only input I have, 24 volts. This is an alternator down here, and this is just like a regular car, and all this alternator does is charge up the batteries. It's not hooked up yet. Charge up the battery, so we keep 24 volts always, like your car, and just you got to keep it all charged up. Around this side, John, this is a timing cam that we built, and basically I time the firing sequence of the spark plug. Is all it's for, and it times the coil, because each coil is separately functioning, and these are the switches here for the various coils with a timing sequence. So basically I have the coils, the timing sequence, and then I have resistors over here. These are variable resistors. And the reason for the resistors is I create so much energy here that I have to get rid of most of it. Basically, I create somewhere around 1,000 volts with about 600 plus amperage. And the volts are fine. I can use the volts. I can't use the amperage because it'll burn my electrodes. So what I do is I get rid of all this energy. 600, maybe 1,000 amps. We could use to light up the house, but for the time being, I don't need it, so I get rid of it. And that's about it. Down there, I just have 2 batteries. And actually, the 2 batteries are just for the spark plug, to fire the spark plug, and to put 24 volts. These coils will take 24 volts, and that's the only reason for the spark plugs. And the engine basically runs by itself in a vacuum in a void, and the energy comes from the vacuum and the void. Now over here we're going to move real quickly over to a 1-cylinder engine. And I started out with this 1-cylinder engine. We have a small Tesla coil here. And like you, John, I got a bunch of old parts. Most of this came from electronic sales, and this is an old 1930 switch here, and I got a bunch of old other switches here you can see. I have a system here. This is a Variac, which I can adjust the RPMs. This is strictly RPM, and this is an old beat-up distributor that I use. And once again, the coil and a spark discharger here, Tesla coil, and the cylinder here with 2 coils. Normally I use 3, but I wanted to see the reaction. I wanted to see, you'll have to see the videotapes. I wanted to see what is happening in this empty chamber, in this vacuum chamber, in which I have a spark, like your car, but no gas, nothing. Empty, nothing. And the biggest explosion happens in there, and this piston here is slammed down, and there's no way in the world even 5 guys can pull this piston down, and it'll turn the crankshaft, and of course turn the car or the bus or the truck. Over here, John, real fast, is an old lab in which I use to treat the gases. And here I have a Tesla coil situation in which I have, these are coils wound one way. Inside here there's another coil that's wound the other way. Then here I have a focus coil wound this way, and the other side I have a focus coil wound the other way. And then the gases come right through here, and I treat them. Here I get these tubes and I break them up. I put a new envelope, glass envelope, and I put stems on it so my gas comes in here, and I bombard it with cathode rays. And once they're bombarded with cathode rays, then it'll go into another component. I have X-ray tubes. I have high-frequency tubes. This is a high-frequency tube here. Actually, it's a cathode ray tube. And this is a cathode ray tube, and I take and put little holes in there and put little stems and run my gases in there and treat them. This is a reverse polarity tube, and these are iron filings that I use to affect the gases as the iron filings are magnetized through a focus coil. And I have some more high frequency tubes. These are hydrogen retention coils, and of course my vacuum gauge. Over here, real fast, John, is my piston. Very different from a car piston. It's hollow. Empty. So this is a vacuum. I draw a vacuum through here, and this one goes here. And this will go up and down with the crankshaft. This remains steady. This is bolted onto the other engine. And I have an anode, cathode, copper, negative, positive. And these are electrodes, and this is tantalum, in which I create X-ray, gamma rays, etc. in here, which affects the gases, which affects the vacuum, which affects the positron. This is just a vacuum tube in here, and my gauge is over here. And I tested all these gases in here, and you can see the big explosion. You'll have to see my video. The big explosion. And since this is plexiglass, carbon derivative, it pulls the carbon atoms, and of course I get soot but that was only for the purpose of looking inside the atom to see what the release of energy looks like, and you can see all of them are basically the same way. And we had hundreds and hundreds of experiments, and we were able to see energy being released by the atom. And then over here, I'm doing a brand new lab altogether, and I can test gases in here, and we can look. I guess once again we have Windows 99, 96, and we can see our gas, and I test them in here with high frequencies, and always in a vacuum. This whole system here, John, is in a vacuum. This is a purifier in which I eliminate from my gases any radiation from what I call cosmic radiation, which would affect my gas. My gas has to be totally pure of cosmic radiation. That's what this little gadget is for. This is an ion gauge tube in which I ionize my gases to perfection, and these also, as you can see, I'm still working on it. Maybe I'll be ready for your next birthday. And this is an argon depolarizer, and this is basically my my control panel. Very simple, not very complex. And over here I have a magnetic coil. Actually, I have 4 of them. And I have magnetic coils, high frequency, and then my gas going through the center. And as you can see, we're not quite ready yet. But anyway, we're here, maybe a couple months. I'll prepare my gases here, and they're ready to be put into the engine. And then, of course, the engine's ready to run for the next 10 years, I hope. No input, no exhaust, no heat, no cooling system required, very little maintenance, 1 moving part. There you are. Happy birthday, John. Next time I'll see you. These are my gases now that I do buy, and you can buy them anywhere. They're raw gases. Helium, neon, argon, krypton. I'll buy them raw. I'll treat them over there. When they're ready, we put them in this little bottle, and they're ready to fuel any of my engines anywhere in the world. So you can take this to the moon and fuel the engine, and we've got power up there for the next 10, 20 years. There's enough in here to fuel maybe 10,000 automobiles for the next 10 years. Not bad. Wow. Over and out.
Thank you.
We have a very small amount of inert gases, namely helium, neon, argon, krypton, and xenon, in here for several purposes. Some of the gases basically will transfer energy. Other gases will cool the cylinder. So the engine does not need a cooling system at all. No fuel goes in, everything is sealed, and our cooling system, the engine cools itself.
What I have seen and the effects that are seen on the videotapes that I personally took have not been tampered with in any way. In fact, most of the effects are not visible to the naked eye, and were not even known about until I started replaying the tapes back frame by frame and started noticing incredible anomalies that could not be accounted for by any other anything that I'd ever heard of or seen before. I've observed them remove all the air from the cylinder and register -2 atmospheres of pressure, and then saw them put in only 120 cc's, which and then ignited was able to push this piston down, which is not considered possible under the current laws of physics, which would allow for an inert gas to produce light but not pressure. There appears to be that in the vacuum, or the most vacuum with a slight amount of noble gases, they're charging, and it creates a frequency that acts as an antenna and draws in certain energies.
There it is. See, there's no reaction yet, no blast. And then the next frame or two there. See the green on the outside? White. Intense light. There's a white light.
Well, the theory is now that the vacuum here acts an antenna for positrons, and that the positron will be drawn in and connect up with one electron, and each blast is only the firing of one electron. Daggers of light would move towards the cylinder. As soon as it touched the cylinder, there would be a flash between frames, and then a plasma reaction would occur, which is, we're somewhat familiar with plasma reactions, and then the piston would be pushed down. And also another amazing thing is, it seems to be linear force rather than the usual three-dimensional force that we're familiar with, where it's just an explosive, a three-dimensional explosion. It appears to be force in one direction also.
There's that longitudinal serrated, very wide at the bottom, then to the right you can see how it's serrated, longitudinal energy that was released. And it works. So we have a two-cylinder engine which we're now perfecting. All the components work. Okay, that's our top plate, aluminum top plate. This is just a sleeve. It's plastic. We just bought it from somewhere. And they come off, and they're just basically to hold the coils, 3 coils on each piston that we use to create a very powerful electromagnetic force field. Now the uniqueness of this is that this engine is not radioactive, it doesn't pollute, there's no fission, no fusion, so there's no danger of running it in this community, in any community. We don't pollute. And then there's a top piston that comes in here, and it seals the gases, and this will move up and down. The torque that we have tested already on a dyno is 1,000 feet-pounds of torque. So you want to compare it to any car. A normal car is about 250 feet-pounds of torque.
And there you can see our engine running steady at about 120 RPM. There's a coupler to the flywheel. We just want to do a test here. See how now we've got 519, 520.
We're talking about no fuel. We run nothing, we burn nothing, and we use nothing. This is the head of the piston. And then here we'll go, we'll put Teflon rings, which will seal the piston itself so that none of the gases can escape. This is stationary. This one will move up and down, you see. There's another portion that goes here, and the top plate we took off, it'll bolt on top so that this will remain stationary. Okay, every cylinder will be like this, but steel, not the engine. And the amount of gas that goes in there, a very small amount that we put in here, we measure by cc's, would cost, after processing all, about 50 cents per cylinder. So it costs $1 to run that engine for an extended period of time. Screw on, and this is how you can screw these off and refuel your engine when it runs out of fuel, if it ever runs out of fuel. These inert gases, we have calculated that they will run, oh, maybe 10,000 hours. There's no limit. We don't know if it'll run 20 years. We haven't run it 20 years, so we don't know. We're going to give you just a demonstration to show that the bottom portion runs and works. We have the battery and, of course, the starter, and Jake's got the button. And it's going to be real noisy because it's a real big starter. If a regular automobile engine in mass production costs you, what, well, $5,000 per engine, roughly? But it has so many components to it that we don't, and therefore this engine should be much cheaper than a standard combustion engine.
Here we are removing the batteries, which are 2 batteries, 2 12-volt batteries from our engine. Basically, we're trying to show that we do not need the batteries once the engine is running. The engine will produce its own energy and can run without any input from any outside source whatsoever. And this is one of the reasons we're doing this. Move the batteries out. Down there you can see a little pedal. We can use that as a, like a pedal in your car. And you can adjust the timing sequence and the RPMs. Or we also have a hand rheostat where we can adjust the the timing sequence of the engine, either fast or real slow. And here Joe is going to increase, and he can decrease the RPMs with a hand rheostat. The engine here right now is doing about 700 RPMs. It's a two-cylinder engine, 400 horsepower, and we can produce approximately 350 kilowatt per hour by attaching a gearbox and a generator to it. This is a small engine. We can do 4, 6, 8-cylinder engines up to a megawatt if we want. We have it on a frame, bolted to a frame. There's a dyno. We're going to do a test with a dynamometer to show the power of the engine. Put a load on it without the batteries connected. Just the engine producing its own energy, its own power. And this runs just like a regular car engine, just has a key, push button. You can turn it on, turn it off. We'll show you that we can turn the engine off and then we start it up again, just like you would your regular car. There's a generator up there, and we have a belt. And on the side you see those long things are resistors. Because we produce so much energy, we have to dissipate about 300 amperes. And here we're going to drop the RPMs real low. The engine will not shake, throw a rod. Very solid, very smooth running at any RPMs. So it's doing about 75 there. And then he'll increase it again.
We're watching something that I feel has never been observed before. I mean, the particle accelerators that Jimmy was talking about, they're surrounded with huge mega-Gauss magnets, you know, and they're completely enclosed, and there's no way to observe the reaction except by, you know, the effects that it creates in like a cloud chamber or something like that, where we see the effect of the thing but not the thing directly. So this may be one of the few opportunities we have to see under controlled circumstances where we can actually watch an effect like this.
We can build anything. If we have the money, let's do a 4, let's do a 6. 6-cylinder will give us about 1,200 horsepower.